Ladies and gentlemen, let's Red Gaming Tetacom video. Let us discuss the PlayStation 4's CPU just a smidgen more, as well as the GPU, but primarily this is aimed at the CPU. So you may remember yesterday I released a video on Infamous Second Son, during which it was basically a post-mortem of the GDC discussions that Sucker Punch had given. And during which Sucker Punch had spoken just a smidgen about the CPU, primarily that it seemed at the moment to be the largest bottleneck. Now there's also been a very small interview, well, more of a couple of lines actually, Gaming Bolt have recently had with Akihiro Suzuki. Hopefully I've pronounced that correctly. I'm terrible with names, if I'm totally honest with you. Anyway, we all have our weaknesses and crosses to bear and all. But anyway, he is the producer of Dynasty Warriors 8, also known as Extreme Legends Complete Edition. And they spoke in various different topics, but primarily they spoke about the PS4's CPU. And he said it's very useful regarding the memory, and he said it was very useful and the capacity is enough, but the CPU on the other hand is a bit slower, as many of you are probably becoming aware of by now. We're pretty satisfied with the specs, but we would be overjoyed if the clock was a bit faster. He also believes, and this one's really curious to me, he said that the 14+4 unit setup is easy to use. If the number of units increased, the possibility of what we could do would increase as well. Now, the reason I bring this to your attention isn't necessarily because it's super informative in terms of a comment, but I find it really interesting that he said 14+4. The reason I do is because you may be aware that the PS4 has 18 GCN units. Now, back in the day, before the PlayStation 4 was actually announced, there were a lot of rumoured specifications, and some of them proved to be true, some of them not so true. But one of the early designs, and actually Mark Cerny commented on this, was the 14+4 setup. Now, in case you're not too familiar with it, the basic premise was that 4 GCN units were basically reserved for compute, while the other 14 were, well, basically used for graphics. So in short, it meant that you'd actually have a significant portion of the GPU, in terms of raw performance, that was basically cordoned off for anything other than graphics, so I say anything other than compute. So in short, the graphics could physically not run on that. However, as far as I understand it, and as far as Sony have commented, they've actually stated that that's not the case. They've basically pointed out that it's actually all 18 are available for use on graphics or compute, and in fact it uses a scheduling system to basically run that. If you're not too familiar with that, you can either check out the Infamous Second Son analysis, or you could do some googling yourself. I've done quite a bit of research in that, so you could check it out if you so wish. So I do find that really curious that he mentioned the 14+4, so maybe there's some remnants of it still inside the system. Maybe he misspoke, maybe I don't know. It's just a little bit strange for me that he did point that out. But regarding the CPU, it would appear that it's going to be the problem for this generation. The CPU side of things, which is somewhat ironic if you were to take into context, say, the PS3. The PS3, on the other hand, had a very powerful CPU. In fact, a lot of stuff actually was put to the CPU, because obviously it did have those SPEs, and they actually did a lot of the grunt work, if you will, the GPU now on the PS4 is being forced to do in terms of compute. The problem is, as one can imagine, it still requires the CPU to basically set the jobs up, and this is simply because the CPU doesn't really have the clout, the actual raw performance of a GPU, but it has much better decision-making systems. Simply, that's just how GPUs and CPUs, the main differences between them. The GPU basically puts a lot more silicon, a lot more of the basically silicon is taken up with pure processing power, and the CPU it's more logic and basically decision making processes as well as the processing power. It's a bit of an oversimplified version, but there you have it. And hopefully that gives you something to think about, my friends. Anyway, I'm gonna get going. Hopefully you've enjoyed the relatively brief video. I'll see you soon, take care, and bye for now.